Captain Zexistar watched the holographic display with obvious amusement as his massive battlecruiser entered Earth's solar system. The blue-green planet spun lazily before him, completely unaware that its fate had already been decided by the Galactic Dominion Council 3 cycles ago. Such a primitive world, his second-in-command, Commander Velnox, observed while studying the tactical readouts. Their most advanced weapons are barely capable of breaching our shield generators. The conquest should take no more than a few rotations. Zexistar's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction. As a decorated officer of the Dominion fleet, he had conquered 47 worlds in his career. Each victory had been swift and decisive, with the native population surrendering within days once they witnessed the overwhelming technological superiority of the Empire. Earth would be no different. The planet's governments had already received their ultimatum through quantum transmission channels. Surrender unconditionally within 72 Earth hours, or face complete orbital bombardment followed by ground invasion. Most civilized species chose surrender when faced with such overwhelming odds. "Sir, we're receiving multiple communications from the planet's surface," reported Lieutenant Krimvol from the communication station. "They appear to be rejecting our terms." Zexistar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Predictable. These primitive species always require a demonstration of our capabilities before they understand their position. He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their largest military installation and fire a warning shot. Something impressive but not too destructive. We want them functional for the labor camps." The ship's main particle beam lanced down toward Earth's surface, striking a remote military testing facility in the middle of a vast desert. The explosion created a crater visible from orbit, sending a mushroom cloud high into the atmosphere. "That should convince them," Velnox said confidently. "I estimate they'll surrender within 6 hours." But 6 hours passed, then 12, then 24. Instead of surrender, Earth's response was defiant silence. Their primitive communication networks buzzed with activity, but no official capitulation came through diplomatic channels. Perhaps they require a more personal demonstration, Zexistar decided. "Begin deploying advanced reconnaissance teams to major population centers. Let them see our soldiers firsthand." The first wave of Dominion troops descended in sleek transport pods, landing in forests and rural areas surrounding human cities. These weren't invasion forces yet, merely scouting parties meant to gather intelligence and intimidate the local population. Sergeant Thakanar led one such team through what human maps called the Amazon rainforest. His squad of 12 elite Dominion soldiers moved through the dense vegetation with practiced efficiency, their advanced sensors mapping everything around them. "This environment is remarkably dense," observed Corporal Yexton, pushing aside hanging vines with his plasma rifle. "The local flora creates significant sensor interference." Thakanar wasn't concerned. His soldiers wore powered armor that enhanced their already superior Krillian physiology. Each stood over 8 feet tall, with natural exoskeletons that could deflect small arms fire. Their weapons could level city blocks, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything these primitive humans possessed. "Maintain formation," he ordered through their comm system. "Intelligence suggests minimal human presence in this sector. We'll establish a forward observation post and monitor their response patterns." They had been walking for perhaps an hour when Thakanar noticed something unusual. The jungle had grown quiet. The constant chirping and buzzing of local wildlife had ceased entirely, leaving only the sound of their own movement through the undergrowth. "Sir," Yexton said quietly, "my motion sensors are detecting something, multiple contacts, but the readings are inconsistent." Before Thakanar could respond, Private Kelmick simply vanished. One moment he was there, taking readings from a strange flowering plant. The next he was gone, leaving only disturbed vegetation and his energy signature slowly fading from their sensors. "Kelmick's report," Thakanar barked into his communicator. Static answered him. The squad immediately formed a defensive circle, weapons raised, scanning the dense foliage around them. Their advanced targeting systems found nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, no electromagnetic emissions that would indicate hostile forces. Then Yexton made a choking sound and collapsed. Thakanar spun toward him and saw a small primitive projectile protruding from a gap in his subordinate's armor, right at the neck joint. The weapon that fired it was nowhere to be seen. "Contact! We have hostile contact!" Thakanar shouted, But his words were lost as more of his soldiers began falling, not to energy weapons or advanced technology, but to simple metal projectiles fired from weapons their sensors couldn't locate. The attackers remained invisible, striking from impossible angles, using the dense jungle canopy as perfect cover. Thoknar's squad fired blindly into the vegetation, their plasma bolts setting trees ablaze, but hitting nothing vital. Within minutes, only 3 soldiers remained alive, and they were retreating in panic toward their landing zone. Thoknar had never experienced anything like this in 4 decades of military service. These weren't advanced warriors with superior technology. These were ghosts, shadows that struck without warning and disappeared without trace. "Command, this is Recon Team 7, he gasped into his communicator as they ran. "We're taking heavy casualties from unknown hostiles. Requesting immediate extraction." Similar reports began flooding in from reconnaissance teams across the planet. Squads were disappearing in mountains, forests, urban areas, and deserts. The few survivors who made it back told impossible stories of humans who moved like spirits and shot with supernatural accuracy. Captain Zextar studied the casualty reports with growing disbelief. In just 72 hours, he had lost over 300 elite soldiers without the humans deploying a single spacecraft or energy weapon. His troops were being eliminated by primitives using chemical propellant firearms and basic camouflage techniques. "This is impossible," Velnox muttered, staring at tactical displays showing red zones where entire recon teams had gone silent. "Our intelligence indicated these humans barely possessed spaceflight capability. How are they neutralizing our most advanced units?" Zextar's confidence was beginning to crack. In his experience, primitive worlds either surrendered immediately or threw massive armies against his superior forces in futile frontal assaults. He had never encountered an enemy that simply made his soldiers disappear one by one, like ghosts picking off targets in the night. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have underestimated these humans." Deep in the Brazilian rainforest, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her ghillie suit and checked her rifle scope for the 100th time that day. The modified Barrett M82 had served her well during 15 years of military service, but she had never imagined using it against alien invaders. 3 days ago, the world had changed forever. Giant ships appeared in Earth's skies, and strange creatures in advanced armor began dropping into remote locations worldwide. The governments were still arguing about surrender terms, but Maria and thousands of hunters, soldiers, and marksmen around the globe had already made their decision. "Contact, 2 clicks northwest," whispered her spotter Carlos through their radio headset. 12 targets, same ugly bastards as yesterday." Maria smiled grimly as she tracked her scope toward the coordinates. The aliens moved through the jungle like tourists, their technology making them confident but sloppy. They relied on their sensors and armor, never imagining that a human with a rifle could be patient enough to wait motionless for hours just for one perfect shot. The lead alien stopped near a fallen log, probably taking readings with some kind of device. Maria controlled her breathing, just like her grandfather had taught her when she was 12 years old, learning to hunt deer in the mountains of Colombia. "Wind is calm. Range 800 meters, Carlos reported softly. Maria found the gap in the alien's armor, right where the neck met the torso. Her grandfather always said the same thing before every hunt. Patience wins over technology every time. These creatures had forgotten that lesson. The rifle bucked against her shoulder and the lead alien dropped instantly. Before his companions could react, she was already working the bolt, chambering another round. In rural Colombia, if you missed your first shot, dinner walked away. These aliens were much bigger than deer, but the principle remained the same. Across the planet, similar scenes played out in every environment imaginable. In the Canadian Rockies, indigenous hunters used traditional tracking skills to stalk alien patrols through snow-covered peaks. Former military snipers in Afghanistan's mountains picked off invaders using terrain they had defended for decades. In the suburbs of Detroit, a retired police officer named Jim Crawford had turned his backyard into a fortress. The aliens' energy weapons were impressive, but they made terrible mistakes when fighting in urban environments. They moved in predictable patterns, stood in open areas, and never checked their corners properly. Jim watched through his basement window as another patrol moved down his street, their hulking forms clearly visible against the morning sky. These creatures were used to fighting other high-tech civilizations in space battles and formal warfare. They had no experience with guerrilla tactics or asymmetric combat. He waited until they passed his house, then slipped out through his back door. Moving from yard to yard through carefully planned routes, he positioned himself behind them. The aliens never looked back, never suspected that their prey might become predators. His old hunting rifle spoke once, and the rear guard dropped silently. Jim was already moving to his next position before the body hit the ground. Urban warfare was like hunting, but with higher stakes and smarter prey. Unfortunately for the aliens, they weren't nearly as smart as they thought. Meanwhile, Captain Zextar was receiving increasingly desperate reports from his ground commanders. What had started as routine reconnaissance was turning into a catastrophe. His elite soldiers, veterans of dozens of campaigns, were being systematically eliminated by an enemy they couldn't see, track, or understand. "Sir, we've lost contact with recon teams 4-7 and 12, reported his communications officer. Team 9 reports taking sniper fire from impossible ranges. They're requesting permission to level the entire forest sector. Zextar studied the tactical displays with growing frustration. Red zones marked areas where his forces had taken casualties, and they covered nearly every continent on the planet. His soldiers were trained to fight conventional armies, not invisible ghosts who struck from nowhere and vanished without trace. "Permission denied," he said finally. "We need those resources intact for the Dominion. Besides, how can primitive projectile weapons threaten soldiers in powered armor?" The answer came in the form of detailed reports from surviving soldiers. The humans weren't using standard military tactics. Instead of large formations and direct confrontation, they employed individual shooters who moved like shadows through natural terrain. They knew every rock, tree, and hiding spot in their local areas. More importantly, they were choosing their targets with surgical precision. Rather than wasting ammunition on heavy armor, they found the weak points, the gaps, the vulnerable spots that even advanced technology couldn't completely protect. Sergeant Thoknar, one of the few survivors from the Amazon, provided the most detailed intelligence. During his debriefing, he described humans who seemed to materialize from the jungle itself, who could remain motionless for hours waiting for the perfect shot, and who knew the terrain so well they could disappear completely within seconds. "They fight like the predators of Kepler 442, he reported, referring to a planet known for its exceptionally deadly wildlife. "But these creatures are intelligent. They study our movements, learn our patterns, and adapt their tactics accordingly." Commander Velnox was reviewing casualty reports when something caught his attention. "Sir, I'm seeing an unusual pattern in these attacks. The humans aren't engaging our soldiers randomly. They're specifically targeting squad leaders, communication specialists, and heavy weapons operators." Zextar leaned over the data pad, his 4 eyes narrowing as he studied the information. Velnox was right. The humans were demonstrating tactical intelligence that suggested coordinated resistance, not random acts of desperation. "They're decapitating our command structure," he realized. "Without leaders or communications, our remaining soldiers become isolated and vulnerable." Back on Earth's surface, this coordination was exactly what was happening. Through social media, ham radio networks, and military communication channels, human resistance fighters were sharing intelligence about alien movement patterns, weak points in their armor, and effective tactics. Maria Santos had uploaded detailed videos showing the exact location of vulnerable joints in alien armor. Jim Crawford shared urban camouflage techniques that had proven effective in city environments. Mountain hunters provided guidance on using terrain for concealment and escape routes. What the Galactic Dominion faced wasn't a primitive military force, but millions of experienced hunters, soldiers, and marksmen who knew their local terrain better than any satellite could map it. These humans had spent their entire lives learning to track, hunt, and survive in environments where a single mistake meant death. Now they were applying those skills against an enemy that had grown overconfident through centuries of technological superiority. The aliens had forgotten that warfare wasn't just about superior weapons and armor. It was about understanding your environment, your enemy, and yourself. The most experienced human hunters understood something the aliens didn't. Patience, positioning, and precision could overcome almost any technological advantage. A well-placed shot at the right moment could eliminate even the most advanced enemy soldier. As night fell across Earth, Thousands of human snipers settled into carefully chosen positions, waiting for dawn and the next opportunity to teach the invaders that this planet had teeth. General Thompson sat in the underground bunker beneath NORAD, studying intelligence reports that painted an increasingly clear picture. The alien invasion wasn't proceeding according to their plan, and humanity's response was proving far more effective than anyone had dared hope. "Sir, we're getting confirmed reports from every continent," Colonel Martinez said, spreading holographic displays across the conference table. "Small unit actions are successfully degrading alien reconnaissance capabilities. Estimated enemy losses are approaching 40% of their ground forces." Thompson nodded grimly. He had spent 30 years in the military, including tours in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. He understood asymmetric warfare better than most, and what he was seeing reminded him of the most effective insurgency tactics he had ever encountered. "The aliens made a fundamental miscalculation," he said, pointing to satellite images showing alien patrol routes. "They're fighting like this is a conventional conquest against a unified military force. They don't understand they're facing millions of individual hunters who know every inch of their hunting grounds." The reports streaming in told a remarkable story. In Alaska, Inuit hunters were using traditional stalking techniques refined over thousands of years to track alien patrols across frozen tundra. The aliens' heat sensors were useless against humans who understood how to mask their thermal signatures using natural materials and terrain features. In Australia's outback, Aboriginal trackers were leading alien patrols into carefully prepared ambush sites. The invaders, dependent on their technology, couldn't comprehend how humans could navigate vast distances without electronic aids or survive in environments their sensors indicated were uninhabitable. "There's something else, sir," Martinez continued, pulling up a global communication map. "The resistance isn't just individual actions anymore. Hunters and military personnel are coordinating across vast distances, sharing real-time intelligence about alien movements and vulnerabilities." Thompson studied the data with growing amazement. Through internet forums, radio networks, and military channels, human fighters were creating a decentralized intelligence network that rivaled anything the Pentagon had ever achieved. When someone in Montana discovered a new weak point in alien armor, shooters in Montana learned about it within hours. Meanwhile, Captain Zextar was experiencing the worst week of his military career. His supposedly routine conquest had devolved into a nightmare of constant casualties and failed missions. Every time he sent out a patrol, fewer soldiers returned. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Krentok of the 5th Fleet," his communications officer announced nervously. Zextar's mandibles clicked with anxiety. Admiral Krentok was his direct superior, and explanations for the current situation would be difficult to provide. The Admiral's imposing figure materialized in the holographic display, his scarred carapace marking him as a veteran of the Centauri Wars. "Captain Zextar, I have reviewed your casualty reports. Explain to me how a primitive world with no significant military technology has eliminated nearly half of your ground forces." "Admiral, these humans employ tactics we have never encountered," Zextar began carefully. "They do not fight as a coordinated army. Instead, they operate as individual predators, using intimate knowledge of their terrain to—" "Individual predators?" Krentok interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Are you telling me that the elite soldiers of the Galactic Dominion are being defeated by scattered primitives with chemical projectile weapons?" Zextar wanted to explain the complexity of the situation, but military protocol demanded simple answers. "Yes, Admiral. The humans have proven unexpectedly resourceful." The Admiral's silence stretched for several uncomfortable moments. "Captain, you have 48 hours to establish control over at least one major population center. If you cannot defeat these primitives with overwhelming force, I will replace you with someone who can." The transmission ended, leaving Zextar staring at tactical displays that showed his forces scattered across an entire planet, pinned down by an enemy they couldn't locate or effectively engage. "Sir," Commander Velnox said quietly, "perhaps we should consider a different approach. Our current tactics clearly aren't effective against this type of resistance." Zextar turned to study the planet rotating slowly beneath his ship. Earth appeared peaceful from orbit, its blue oceans and white clouds giving no hint of the deadly conflict raging on its surface. "What do you recommend?" "Concentrated force deployment. Instead of scattered reconnaissance teams, we could deploy entire battalions to secure specific targets, overwhelming local resistance through sheer numbers. It was a reasonable tactical adjustment, but Zextar had nagging doubts. The humans had already demonstrated their ability to disappear when faced with superior numbers, only to reappear when his forces were most vulnerable. Still, Admiral Krentak's ultimatum left him few options. Very well. Prepare Operation Crushing Fist. Deploy the 3rd, 7th, and 9th Battalions to secure the human settlement designated as New York City. Show these primitives what happens when they resist the Dominion. Back on Earth, news of the massive alien deployment spread through resistance networks within hours. Instead of causing panic, it galvanized human defenders into unprecedented coordination. Maria Santos received the alert while cleaning her rifle in a temporary camp, 50 kilometers from her original position. The message was brief but clear. Major alien force heading for New York, estimated strength 3,000 soldiers, arrival in 18 hours. Carlos, she called to her spotter, pack everything. We're moving. Where to? New York. Time to show these bastards what happens when they threaten our cities. Similar conversations were taking place across North America. Hunters, ex-military personnel, police officers, and armed civilians began moving toward probable defensive positions around the target city. They traveled in small groups using back roads and forest paths that didn't appear on any satellite map. The aliens had made another critical error. By concentrating their forces on a single target, they were allowing human defenders to concentrate as well. But while the aliens moved in massive, visible formations that announced their presence from hundreds of kilometers away, the humans moved like smoke, invisible and untraceable. Jim Crawford loaded his truck with ammunition and supplies, then called his brother in Pennsylvania. Remember what Dad taught us about urban warfare during his police days? Time to put it to use. Within 12 hours, nearly 10,000 human fighters were converging on New York City. They weren't soldiers marching in formation, but individuals who understood that their planet's freedom depended on making the aliens pay dearly for every meter of ground they claimed. The battle for New York was about to begin, and the Galactic Dominion was about to learn why humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of making their enemies very, very dead. The first alien dropships descended toward Manhattan like metallic meteors, their energy shields glowing against the early morning sky. Major Thexanol of the 9th Battalion watched through his command pod's viewports as the human city spread beneath them. A maze of concrete and steel that would soon bow before Dominion might. All units, prepare for rapid deployment, he commanded through the battalion network. Intelligence indicates minimal organized resistance. We should have the city secured within 6 hours. What Major Thexanol didn't know was that every rooftop, window, and alley in a 50-block radius was already occupied by humans who had been waiting for exactly this moment. They hadn't come to hold territory or defend fixed positions. They had come to kill aliens. Maria Santos lay prone on a rooftop overlooking Central Park, her rifle trained on the primary landing zone. 40 meters to her left, a retired Marine named Steve Chen had positioned himself behind an air conditioning unit with a clear field of fire toward the same area. Neither knew the other existed, but both were part of an invisible network of shooters that had transformed Manhattan into the world's largest killing field. The first alien dropship touched down in Central Park with surprising gentleness, its landing ramp lowering to disgorge 24 heavily armored soldiers. They moved in textbook formation, establishing a defensive perimeter while their sensors swept for threats. Maria centered her crosshairs on the squad leader and squeezed the trigger. The alien dropped instantly, his advanced armor no match for a .50 caliber round placed precisely at the neck joint. Before his body hit the ground, Steve Chen had eliminated the communications specialist, and a dozen other shots rang out from concealed positions around the park. The aliens tried to return fire, but their energy weapons struck empty windows and abandoned rooftops. The human shooters had already moved to secondary positions, vanishing into the urban landscape like ghosts. Contact. We have contact with hostile forces. Major Thexanol heard his ground commanders reporting over increasingly frantic radio chatter, unable to identify firing positions. Requesting orbital support. From his command ship in orbit, Captain Zextar watched the tactical display with growing horror. Red indicators showed his forces taking casualties across multiple landing zones, but his sensors couldn't locate the source of enemy fire. The humans were using the city itself as camouflage, turning every building into a potential sniper's nest. Sir, the humans appear to have prepared defensive positions throughout the target area, Commander Velnox reported. Our forces are encountering resistance from multiple directions simultaneously. On the ground, Sergeant Colvin led what remained of his squad through the concrete canyons of Manhattan's financial district. The streets were eerily empty, but he could feel hostile eyes watching from every direction. His motion sensors detected movement, but when he investigated, he found nothing but blowing debris and abandoned vehicles. This is wrong, his pointman, Corporal Dexrim, muttered through their comm system. Where are all the inhabitants? Why are the streets empty? The answer came in the form of a rifle shot that took Dexrim's head clean off. The bullet had come from somewhere high above, but when Colvin looked up at the towering skyscrapers, he saw only empty windows and blank walls. 3 blocks away, former NYPD sniper detective Lisa Rodriguez was already climbing down from her firing position on the 32nd floor of an office building. She had memorized evacuation routes through the building's service tunnels, allowing her to disappear completely within minutes of taking her shot. The evacuation of Manhattan had taken place over 3 days, with civilians moving out through pre-planned routes while resistance fighters moved in. The city had become a carefully orchestrated trap, with every advantage given to the defenders. All units, fall back to secondary positions, came the order through Rodriguez's radio earpiece. This was exactly what they had planned for. Draw the aliens into the urban maze, hit them hard, then fade away before they could respond effectively. Major Thexnell was discovering that urban warfare against an invisible enemy was unlike anything in his military experience. His soldiers controlled the streets they occupied, but the moment they moved to a new position, snipers would emerge from buildings they had already cleared. How many humans are we facing? He demanded of his intelligence officer. Sir, our casualty patterns suggest at least 2,000 individual shooters, but they operate independently. No centralized command structure detected. 2,000 human fighters against 3,000 alien soldiers should have been manageable, but these humans weren't fighting like a conventional force. They struck without warning, inflicted maximum casualties, then vanished before his soldiers could mount effective counterattacks. In the subway tunnels beneath the city, former Special Forces operator Captain Jake Morrison was leading a team of urban warfare specialists through maintenance passages that didn't appear on any official map. New York's underground was a labyrinth that had grown organically over more than a century, and locals who had worked in these tunnels for decades knew routes that satellites couldn't detect. Team 2 is in position under Grand Central, Morrison reported through encrypted radio. Team 4 has charges set on the subway supports under the alien command post. The humans weren't just using the city's vertical space for sniper positions. They were using its underground infrastructure to move unseen and strike from completely unexpected directions. Above ground, alien forces had managed to establish a command post in Times Square, with overlapping fields of fire and sensor coverage that should have made it impregnable. Major Thexnell felt a moment of satisfaction as his forces finally secured a defensible position. Then the explosions began. The subway tunnel collapse took out the command post's primary support, causing the massive alien vehicles to sink into the ground. As alien soldiers scrambled to respond to this underground attack, human snipers emerged from buildings around the square and opened fire on the confused defenders. "This is madness," Major Thexnell shouted into his communicator as his carefully planned operation dissolved into chaos. "These humans fight like demons. They're everywhere and nowhere." Captain Zextar watched his tactical display in stunned silence as another of his battalions reported catastrophic losses. The humans had turned their own city into a weapon, using every level from the underground tunnels to the highest rooftops to create overlapping kill zones that his forces couldn't escape. "Sir," his weapons officer reported hesitantly, "the ground commanders are requesting permission to level entire city blocks to eliminate sniper positions." Zextar considered the option, but orbital bombardment would destroy the very infrastructure the Dominion needed to make Earth a productive colony. More importantly, Admiral Krentok had made it clear that failure to secure the city with ground forces would result in Zextar's immediate replacement. Negative. Our soldiers must adapt to these conditions and overcome primitive resistance through superior training and equipment. But adaptation was exactly what the humans had been doing for 3 days. Every alien tactic, every movement pattern, every technological advantage had been studied and countered by defenders who understood that their planet's freedom depended on making this city an alien graveyard. As the sun set over Manhattan, the Galactic Dominion's supposedly unstoppable ground forces found themselves trapped in an urban nightmare where death could come from any direction at any moment, delivered by an enemy that refused to fight fair and seemed to know the terrain better than any computer could map it. Admiral Krentok materialized in Captain Zextar's command center with the fury of a solar storm. His massive form, scarred from a dozen campaigns across the galaxy, dominated the bridge as he studied the tactical displays showing the disaster unfolding on Earth's surface. 48 hours. Captain, the Admiral said, his voice carrying the cold precision of deep space. 48 hours to secure one primitive city, and you have managed to lose 70% of 3 elite battalions to savages with chemical projectile weapons. Zextar's mandibles clicked nervously as he pulled up the most recent casualty reports. Admiral, these humans employ tactics that violate every principle of civilized warfare. They refuse to meet our forces in open battle, instead hiding like parasites throughout their urban environment. Parasites, Krentok repeated slowly. You are telling me that the finest soldiers of the Galactic Dominion are being defeated by parasites. The holographic displays painted a grim picture. Manhattan had become a meat grinder that consumed alien soldiers at an unprecedented rate. Every building was a potential sniper's nest, every street a potential kill zone, every advance a step deeper into a carefully prepared trap. Sir, if I may, Commander Velnox interjected carefully, the humans appear to be fighting a different type of war entirely. They don't seek to hold territory or protect fixed positions. Their only objective seems to be inflicting maximum casualties on our forces. Admiral Krentok studied the tactical data with the eye of a soldier who had conquered 3 star systems. Show me their command structure. That's the problem, Admiral. There isn't one. At least not in any form we can identify. The humans operate in small independent groups with no apparent central coordination. This was partially true. While there was no single human commander directing the defense of Manhattan, the resistance network had evolved into something far more dangerous than traditional military hierarchy. Real-time intelligence sharing through encrypted channels allowed thousands of individual fighters to coordinate their actions, without ever meeting face-to-face. Maria Santos crouched in an abandoned apartment building, reviewing the latest intelligence updates on her tablet. The aliens had pulled back to defensive positions around their remaining landing zones, but that just made them easier targets for coordinated sniper fire. New tactical update, she whispered into her radio headset. Aliens are concentrating near Central Park again. All units with clear lines of sight prepare for synchronized engagement. Similar conversations were taking place across the city. Former military personnel, police officers, hunters, and armed civilians were operating with a level of coordination that impressed even veteran soldiers. They had turned the defense of their city into a deadly symphony of precisely timed violence. 50 stories above Manhattan, Master Sergeant Chen Wei of the Chinese People's Liberation Army had spent 18 hours in a construction crane, motionless as a statue waiting for the perfect shot. His patience was rewarded when an alien officer emerged from cover to coordinate the movement of supplies. The shot was over a mile, requiring calculations for wind, temperature, and the target's movement pattern. Chen had made similar shots during peacekeeping operations in Africa, but never against enemies wearing advanced armor. Fortunately, human marksmen had identified the weak points in alien protection, and precision could overcome almost any technological advantage. The alien officer dropped, and within seconds, sniper fire from a dozen concealed positions began picking off his subordinates. The aliens tried to return fire, but their energy weapons struck empty buildings while the humans had already moved to new positions. This pattern repeated throughout the day. Whenever alien forces attempted to advance or regroup, precisely coordinated sniper fire would devastate their formations. The humans never stayed in one position long enough for effective counter-battery fire, and they knew the urban terrain so well that pursuit was impossible. Major Thexnal huddled in what remained of his command post, a reinforced position in the lobby of a luxury hotel that had been reduced to rubble by human explosive devices. His once proud battalion had been reduced to fewer than 300 effective soldiers, and every attempt to advance resulted in more casualties. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the other landing zones," his communications officer reported grimly. "Battalion 7 and 3 are reporting similar casualties. The humans have turned this entire city into a killing field." Through broken windows, Thexnell could see the Manhattan skyline rising around him like the teeth of some massive predator. Every building represented a potential threat. Every shadow might conceal a human sniper. His forces were trapped in an urban environment that seemed designed specifically to negate every advantage their technology provided. "Request immediate evacuation to orbit," he decided. "We cannot hold these positions against this type of resistance." But Admiral Krentok had other plans. The reputation of the Galactic Dominion was at stake, and retreat from a primitive world would encourage resistance across dozens of systems. If conventional tactics weren't working, perhaps it was time for a more direct approach. "Captain Zextar, prepare the orbital bombardment systems," the Admiral commanded. "If these humans want to fight like animals, we will treat them accordingly." Zextar hesitated. "Admiral, orbital bombardment will destroy the very infrastructure we came to capture. The Dominion Council specifically ordered that Earth's resources be taken intact. The Dominion Council will understand that sometimes examples must be made. Destroy their largest city, and the rest of the planet will surrender immediately." High above Earth, the massive battlecruiser's main weapons began charging for planetary bombardment. The energy signatures were detected immediately by human monitoring stations, and the information spread through resistance networks at light speed. In bunkers beneath Manhattan, emergency protocols activated automatically. The civilians had been evacuated days ago, but now it was time for the resistance fighters to withdraw as well. They had accomplished their mission of making the aliens pay dearly for their invasion attempt. Maria Santos received the evacuation order while preparing for another sniper engagement. "All units, Operation Blackout is now in effect. Withdraw to predetermined rally points immediately." But as thousands of human fighters began their carefully planned withdrawal from Manhattan, they left behind one final surprise for their alien enemies. Hidden throughout the city were explosive devices placed by demolition experts who understood that sometimes the best defense was ensuring your enemy gained nothing from victory. The charges weren't meant to destroy the city, but to eliminate every piece of alien equipment and personnel that remained. As the last human fighters disappeared into evacuation tunnels and underground passages that had been prepared months in advance, remote detonators activated across dozens of locations. Major Thexnell was coordinating his forces' consolidation when the explosions began. Not the massive orbital bombardment he expected, but precisely placed charges that targeted alien positions with surgical accuracy. Buildings collapsed in exactly the right locations to crush alien vehicles and equipment. Underground explosions severed power lines and communication cables that the aliens had been using for their operations. "Sir, all our heavy equipment is destroyed," his weapons officer reported in panic. The humans somehow knew exactly where we had positioned everything. From orbit, Admiral Krentok watched his ground forces positions disappear from the tactical display one by one. The humans had spent days studying alien deployment patterns, and their final strike eliminated every piece of valuable technology his forces had brought to the surface. "Admiral," Zextar said quietly, "the humans have withdrawn completely. Our sensors show no remaining resistance fighters in the target area." Krentok studied the empty city below with growing understanding. The humans hadn't been trying to hold Manhattan at all. They had been using it as bait, drawing his best soldiers into a carefully prepared killing ground where every advantage belonged to the defenders. "Fire the orbital weapons," he commanded grimly. The battlecruiser's main particle beam lanced down toward Earth, striking Manhattan with enough energy to level city blocks. But as the smoke cleared, Krentok realized the futility of his action. He was destroying empty buildings and abandoned streets while the humans who had defeated his ground forces were already miles away. "Planning their next attack. Status report," he demanded. "Sir, we have lost approximately 2,000 soldiers and most of our heavy ground equipment," his tactical officer reported. "Human casualties appear to be minimal." For the first time in his military career, Admiral Krentok was beginning to understand that the Galactic Dominion might have underestimated their enemy. These humans weren't fighting like any civilization the Empire had encountered before. They weren't protecting territory or resources. They were simply making invasion so costly that continued conquest became impossible. "Sir, "We're receiving communications from resistance groups worldwide," the communications officer announced nervously. "They're thanking us for the demonstration." "What demonstration?" "They say by destroying Manhattan, we've shown every human on the planet exactly what surrender means. Resistance movements are reporting massive increases in..." Admiral Krentok stood before the holographic display showing Earth's continents, each marked with red zones indicating human resistance activity. What had started as routine conquest had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic dominion history. 3 weeks after the Manhattan disaster, his forces controlled exactly 0% of the planet's surface. "Report," he commanded his intelligence officer. "Sir, human resistance has expanded exponentially since the destruction of their city. We're detecting coordinated activities across all major landmasses. They appear to be implementing what their military texts call total war doctrine." Krentok studied the data with growing concern. Instead of breaking human morale, the orbital bombardment had unified the planet's population in ways that conventional warfare never could. Every nation, every ethnic group, every political faction had put aside their differences to focus on a single objective, making the invasion so costly that the aliens would leave. "How many resistance fighters are we facing?" "Conservative estimates suggest over 50 million active combatants, sir. But the number grows daily as civilian populations join the resistance." 50 million. Krentok had conquered entire star systems with fewer total casualties. The humans weren't just fielding their professional military forces. They were turning every adult on the planet into a potential soldier. On Earth's surface, the transformation was remarkable. Maria Santos now commanded a network of resistance cells that stretched across 3 states. Former enemies had become allies when faced with an existential threat to their species. Russian Special Forces operators shared tactics with American hunters. Chinese engineers worked alongside Israeli technicians to develop new weapons and communication systems, intelligence. Reports alien patrol routes through the Cascade Mountains, her communications specialist announced during the morning briefing. 8 targets, standard reconnaissance formation. Maria nodded to her second in command, a former British SAS operative named James Crawford. "How many teams can we mobilize for intercept?" 12 sniper teams plus support elements. We can hit them from multiple directions simultaneously. This level of coordination would have been impossible during the early days of the invasion. But 3 weeks of constant combat had forged human resistance fighters into an efficient killing machine that operated across continents. They had learned to think like their enemy, to predict alien movements, and to exploit every weakness in their technology and tactics. The alien patrol moved through the mountain forest with practiced efficiency, their sensors sweeping for threats while maintaining proper spacing and communication protocols. Sergeant Vexcol had led similar patrols on a dozen worlds, and the routine was always the same. Local resistance would attempt a few ineffective attacks, take heavy casualties, and eventually surrender or retreat to irrelevant hiding places. What he didn't know was that 48 human marksmen had been tracking his patrol for 6 hours, moving through terrain they had known since childhood. Every approach route was covered, every escape path blocked, every hiding spot compromised. The first shot came from a ridge 800 meters away, taking down the patrol's communications specialist. Before Vexcol could react, his heavy weapons operator dropped to a round fired from the opposite direction. Within 30 seconds, 11 more shots eliminated every alien in his patrol except Vexcol himself. He found himself alone in a forest that had suddenly become completely silent. His advanced armor's sensors detected no movement, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic emissions that would indicate hostile forces. Yet 12 of his soldiers lay dead around him, killed by weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their protection. "This is Patrol 7, he whispered into his communicator. "We have taken heavy casualties from unknown hostiles, requesting immediate extraction." The response came not from his command center, but from a human voice speaking perfect galactic standard. "Request denied, alien. Welcome to Earth." The transmission cut to static, and Vexcol realized that the humans had not only monitored his communications, but had somehow hijacked his equipment. A moment later, a single shot from the trees ended his confusion permanently. Similar engagements were taking place across the globe. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal trackers led alien patrols into carefully prepared ambush sites where the desert itself became a weapon. In the Canadian wilderness, indigenous hunters used traditional knowledge, passed down through generations, to track and eliminate invaders who thought their technology made them invincible, Captain. Zextar received these reports with mounting desperation. His forces were being systematically eliminated, not by superior technology or massive armies, but by individual humans who fought with a determination he had never encountered in 4 decades of military service. "Sir, we're losing an average of 50 soldiers per day," his tactical officer reported. "At this rate, our ground forces will be completely eliminated within 6 months. And recruitment for human resistance continues to increase," added the intelligence officer. "They're using our own attacks against them as propaganda to motivate their population." Zextar understood the impossible situation he faced. Every alien soldier killed became a martyr for human resistance. Every human civilian killed became motivation for 100 more to join the fight. The mathematics of attrition were simple and devastating. Earth had billions of potential fighters, while his forces numbered in the thousands. "Sir," Commander Velnox said quietly, "perhaps it's time to consider alternative strategies, such as withdrawal." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. In the entire history of the Galactic Dominion, no invasion force had ever withdrawn from a primitive world. The political ramifications would be catastrophic, potentially triggering rebellions across dozens of systems. But the alternative was continuing to feed his soldiers into a meat grinder that showed no signs of slowing down. Meanwhile, Admiral Krentok was receiving similar reports from orbital reconnaissance. Human resistance wasn't weakening under pressure. It was growing stronger, more organized, more effective with each passing day. The species was demonstrating an adaptability that his military analysts found deeply disturbing. "Admiral," his xenopsychology specialist reported, "I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood human psychology. Most species fight to protect specific resources or territories. Humans appear to fight for abstract concepts like freedom and independence. They would rather die than submit to external control." Krentok had conquered species that fought for territory, resources, religious beliefs, and political systems, but he had never encountered a species that fought simply because they refused to be conquered. It was a mindset that made negotiation impossible and defeat unacceptable to the enemy. "What do you recommend?" "Complete extinction of the species, sir. As long as humans exist, they will resist our presence. There can be no peaceful coexistence with a species that refuses to acknowledge defeat." The suggestion was logical from a military perspective, but politically impossible. The Galactic Dominion needed Earth's resources and strategic position. Destroying the planet would eliminate both the problem and the prize. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth's surface. The humans are requesting negotiations." Krentok felt a moment of hope. Perhaps the resistance leaders had finally realized the futility of their position and were ready to discuss surrender. Terms put them through. The image that appeared on the main screen was not what he expected. Instead of defeated military commanders or desperate political leaders, he found himself looking at an elderly human female sitting calmly in what appeared to be a simple wooden chair. "I am Secretary General Chen Wei of the United Nations," the woman said in perfect galactic standard. "I represent the unified government of Earth in our negotiations for your immediate withdrawal from our system." Krentok's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Human, you appear to misunderstand your position. We are offering you the opportunity to surrender before we eliminate your species entirely." "Admiral," Chen Wei replied with a slight smile, "I believe you misunderstand our position. We're not seeking surrender. We're offering you the chance to leave our system alive." Admiral Krentok stared at the human female on his screen with a mixture of disbelief and growing unease. In his decades of military service, conquered species had never spoken to him with such calm confidence. They begged, they threatened, they negotiated desperately for their survival. They did not offer him safe passage from their own system. "You cannot be serious," he said finally. "Your primitive world lacks the technology to threaten vessels of the Galactic Dominion." Secretary General Chen Wei nodded politely. "That was true 4 weeks ago, Admiral. Many things have changed since your arrival." Before Krentok could respond, his tactical officer interrupted with obvious alarm. "Sir, we're detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface." "Unknown projectiles," Non-standard energy signatures. The main display shifted to show dozens of trails rising from Earth's atmosphere, moving too slowly to be missiles, but too fast to be conventional aircraft. As they approached the orbital fleet, scanners began providing detailed analysis that made Krentok's blood freeze in his veins. "Sir, those aren't missiles. They're modified human spacecraft loaded with what appears to be improvised explosive devices." "Impossible. Humans lack the technology for effective orbital operations." "Admiral," Chen Wei's voice drew his attention back to the communication screen. "Your invasion provided us with significant motivation to accelerate our technological development. We've had some remarkable breakthroughs in recent weeks. What she didn't mention was that those breakthroughs included reverse engineering alien technology, recovered from destroyed dropships and equipment. Human engineers working around the clock for 3 weeks had managed to adapt alien power sources and propulsion systems for their own purposes. The approaching spacecraft were human, construction vehicles and cargo haulers that had been hastily converted into orbital weapons platforms. They couldn't match alien technology for sophistication, but they didn't need to. They only needed to get close enough to detonate massive explosive charges salvaged from mining operations around the globe. "Defensive fire," Krentok commanded. "Destroy those primitive vessels before they reach effective range." His ship's point defense systems opened fire, energy beams lancing out toward the approaching human craft. Several were destroyed immediately, their improvised shielding no match for advanced alien weapons. But there were too many targets approaching from too many directions for complete interception. The first converted cargo hauler reached the outer perimeter of the alien fleet and detonated with spectacular results. Its payload, composed of 10 tons of mining explosives enhanced with salvaged alien power cells, created an explosion visible from Earth's surface. "Sir, the humans have somehow enhanced conventional explosives with our own technology," the weapons officer reported in disbelief. The explosion yield was equivalent to tactical nuclear weapons. More human vessels reached their targets, each detonation wreaking havoc on ships that had been designed to fight other advanced civilizations, not improvised weapons delivery systems that ignored conventional rules of engagement. "How many ships have we lost?" Krentok demanded. 3 destroyers and a heavy cruiser, sir. The humans are sacrificing their vessels in kamikaze attacks." On Earth's surface, Maria Santos watched the orbital battle through binoculars from her command post in the Rocky Mountains. Each explosion in the sky represented human pilots who had volunteered for one-way missions to protect their planet. They were former astronauts, test pilots, and civilian volunteers who understood that someone had to carry the fight to the enemy's doorstep. "Phase 2 is launching now," her communications specialist reported. 12 more converted vessels are lifting, off from sites across the globe. The second wave of human kamikaze attacks targeted specific alien vessels identified. Through careful observation of their formation patterns, human intelligence networks had spent weeks identifying command ships, supply vessels, and critical support craft within the alien fleet. "Admiral," Chen Wei's voice continued calmly from the communication screen, "this demonstration represents approximately 1% of our current orbital strike capability. We have modified over 2,000 spacecraft for similar missions." Krentok studied the tactical display with growing horror. His fleet was designed to overwhelm primitive worlds through technological superiority and coordinated firepower. It was not equipped to handle massive swarms of suicidal attackers willing to sacrifice everything for minor tactical advantages. "Furthermore," Chen Wei continued, "our ground forces have successfully reverse-engineered several of your key technologies. We now possess the ability to manufacture weapons and equipment that match your capabilities in many areas." This was a slight exaggeration, but not by much. Human engineers had indeed managed to adapt alien technology for their own use, creating hybrid weapons that combined human manufacturing techniques with alien power sources and targeting systems. "What are your terms?" Krentok asked quietly. "Complete withdrawal of all Galactic Dominion forces from our solar system within 72 hours. Any alien vessels or personnel remaining after that deadline will be destroyed without further warning." "And if we refuse?" Chen Wei's expression never changed. "Then we will continue our current strategy until your fleet is completely eliminated. We estimate it will take approximately 6 months to destroy every alien vessel in our system using current tactics." "You would sacrifice thousands of your own people for such a Pyrrhic victory?" Admiral, you fundamentally misunderstand human psychology. We don't consider defending our home a sacrifice. We consider it a privilege. Krentok studied the tactical displays showing his casualties and the waves of human attackers still approaching his fleet. The mathematics were simple and devastating. Even if he destroyed 100 human vessels for every alien ship lost, Earth had far more spacecraft than he had warships. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're receiving similar transmissions from resistance groups on the planet's surface. They're offering to cease hostilities if we withdraw immediately. And if we refuse? They've provided detailed intelligence on our remaining ground forces positions. They know exactly where every one of our soldiers is located. On the ground, human resistance fighters had indeed identified every alien position through weeks of careful surveillance. More importantly, they had developed tactics and weapons specifically designed to eliminate those positions with minimal human casualties. Admiral, Captain Zextar said quietly, our ground forces cannot survive sustained resistance at current intensity levels. The humans have turned their entire planet into a weapon designed specifically to kill our soldiers. Admiral Krentok faced a decision that no Galactic Dominion commander had ever confronted. He could continue the invasion and watch his forces slowly consumed by an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules of warfare. Or he could retreat from a primitive world and face the political consequences of failure. All ships, prepare for withdrawal to the edge of the system, he commanded finally. Sir, the Dominion Council will understand that some worlds are not worth conquering, Krentok interrupted. Prepare a report detailing human resistance capabilities for transmission to Fleet Command. Other commanders need to understand what they would face if they attempt to invade this system. As the alien fleet began withdrawing from Earth orbit, Secretary General Chen Wei allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had passed its first test as a spacefaring civilization. They had proven that determination, adaptability, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom could overcome almost any technological disadvantage. Madam Secretary, her aide asked, do you think they'll return? Chen Wei looked up at the stars where alien ships were retreating toward the edge of the solar system. Eventually, perhaps. But when they do, they'll find us ready. And next time we won't be fighting with converted cargo haulers and mining explosives. Across Earth, human engineers were already working on new projects based on captured alien technology. Weapons, spacecraft, and defensive systems that would ensure humanity's independence among the stars. The Galactic Dominion had wanted to conquer a primitive world and instead had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that refused to be conquered and possessed the intelligence to turn any challenge into an opportunity for growth. The galaxy would never be the same.